Hello, dear participants. My name is Sibylla Martinelli, and I'm the national contact point for the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions in Switzerland. Today, I will lead you through this presentation, and my dear colleague Juliane Sauer, who is also the Swiss national contact point for the MSCA, will be in charge of the chat. Today, you will get an idea of what the postdoctoral fellowships are about. We will introduce the eligibility criteria of the postdoctoral fellowships. You will also get some information on call statistics. You will learn about the proposal structure. And last, but very importantly, also you will learn what kind of support you can get and where to turn to in case you're interested in applying for my Skłodowska-Curie postdoctoral fellowship and where you can get your support. This webinar is brought to you by the Net for Mobility Plus project, which is a network financed by the EU, which helps facilitate the work of MSCA NCPs, national contact points. The presentation will be recorded and uploaded on the Net for Mobility Plus website. So if you want to rewatch or send a link to interested colleagues, please feel free to do so. We will also send you the link to the recorded presentation in a follow-up email after the event. We will do our best to answer your questions during this event. But if questions should arise later or could not be answered in the chat, they can be sent to the NCP in your country. Their contact data can be found either on the Funding and Tender Opportunities portal or also on the Net for Mobility Plus website. You see here the map of MSCA NCP contacts worldwide. So you go to the to the Net for Mobility Plus website, and you just click on the country where you are currently at or where you want to go for your research project, and you will see whom you should contact. The European Commission claims that there is an MSCA, an action for every stage of career. If you want to know more about the other actions, I would like to invite you to check out the official MSCA website. Marie Skłodowska-Curie was the name giver for this program because her life, her path, and also her attitude reflect the main features of this program, excellence and mobility. And as the rest of the MSCA, the postdoctoral fellowships are all about career development and training for excellent researchers. And as you might know, this year a new research framework program of the EU started. It is called Horizon Europe, and it will last until the end of 2027. If you compare it with the former one, Horizon 2020, there are some principles and novelties of Horizon Europe that can be highlighted. So actions were streamlined. They have a clear identity because there are no longer the different sub-actions, the different implementation modes or specific panels. Rules became simpler, conditions were harmonized. For example, there's only one single mobility rule for all actions. Definitions were fine-tuned, so the formerly called early stage researchers are now called doctoral candidates, and the formerly called experienced researchers are now called postdoctoral researchers. With regards to managing the demand, a restriction on resubmission will be introduced from 2020 onward, no, 2022 calls onwards. But importantly, this doesn't apply to the 21 calls. Then new guidelines on supervision were published to ensure that researchers are adequately supervised. And sustainable behaviors and policies will be promoted through the MSCA Green Charter and also through Green Deal thematic clustering events. All MSCA projects are encouraged to embrace diversity. Family allowances will be accessible to all, even if their parental status changes during the duration of the project. And this is in the interest, of course, of non-discrimination and equal opportunities. Long-term leave allowance in case of researchers' leave, including maternity, paternity, or also sick or special leave, were introduced. And there is a broader definition of family to ensure full access to these allowances. Also recognized are now LGBTI plus couples. Then intersectoral exposure will be encouraged through incentives. You will see that later on. In Horizon Europe, as in the former program, there are 5 Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions. The MSCA doctoral networks, they were the former MSCA ITNs, and the MSCA staff exchanges, they were in the former framework program, they were called the Research and Innovation Staff Exchanges, or short RISE. Then the MSCA postdoctoral fellowships, they were called individual fellowships in Horizon 2020. And then there is MSCA co-fund and MSCA and citizens. This was formerly called Researchers' Night. And today's info event is about the postdoctoral fellowships. These fellowships offer funding for excellent researchers with excellent projects and also for their training and acquisition of skills. Like this, they aim at fostering excellence through the implementation of a research project. They build bridges to the non-academic sector and are open to all scientific fields. Yes, and they are opportunities for experienced researchers looking to give their career a boost by working abroad or in a different sector. They come in the form of European and global fellowships. The European postdoctoral fellowships are for researchers coming to Europe from any country in the world or for researchers moving within Europe. They last 12 to 24 months, and from this year on, they no longer come with separate panels. European fellowships can include secondments worldwide, up to 1/3 of the fellowship duration. This is new. Up to now, secondment hosts could only be located in EU member states or associated countries. Now, worldwide secondments are possible. And now, new, there is also the option of an additional placement of up to 6 months in a non-academic European organization at the end of the fellowship. This applies to the European, but also to the global fellowship. The global fellowships are for researchers going to countries outside EU member states and associated countries for 12 to 24 months in a so-called outgoing phase, and then returning for a 12-month mandatory return phase in Europe. So the total duration of these fellowships can be from 24 to 36 months. Also here, secondments can be hosted worldwide and can last to up to 1/3 of the fellowship duration. And also for the global fellowships, there's an option of including an additional placement of up to 6 months in a non-academic European organization at the end of the fellowship. Both the European as the global fellowship, as all Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions, have a so-called bottom-up approach, meaning research fields are chosen freely by the applicants, and all domains of research and technological development are eligible for funding. Host organizations should be institutions active in research and training. They should be located in an EU member state or associated country, and they can be from the academic or the non-academic sector. So legal entities like universities, research institutions, businesses in an EU member state or Horizon Europe associated country can apply as hosting institution together with a researcher proposing a research project. If funded, the project will be carried out by the researcher under the supervision of a PI at the hosting institution. The hosting institution will be the beneficiary of the action and receive the money from the EU if the fellowship is funded. So the hosting institution will hire the fellow on a regular working contract, will pay salaries, etc. In global fellowships, the return host in Europe will be the beneficiary and pay the fellow's salary. Eligible organizations for hosting fellows can be from the academic or non-academic sector, as I mentioned. The academic sector is defined as public or private higher education institutions awarding academic degrees, or public or private non-profit research organizations, or international European interest organizations. And for the non-academic sector, there's a very broad definition applied. Non-academic is any socio-economic actor not included in the academic sector definition. So, as I mentioned, it is possible or even wished to include secondments to the fellowship. There was a possibility to include secondments during the fellowship for years already, but it was only possible to have host institutions for these secondments that were located in European countries. Now, such secondments can be international. So the secondment host can also be outside Europe. Secondments can have a duration of up to 1/3 of the total project duration for a European fellowship and up to 1/3 of the duration of the outgoing phase in global fellowships. Secondments can be divided in several smaller periods and can be held in any sector. And moreover, there is now the option of spending these additional 6 months in a non-academic institution after the fellowship. From 2016 until last year, there was a specific panel dedicated to proposals carried out at the non-academic host institution. This is discontinued, but the additional 6 months secondment or placement was introduced to further bridge between academic and non-academic sector. The placement should be at the host in an EU member state or associated country. Oops. Recruited researchers can be of any nationality in European fellowships. However, global fellowships are only for nationals or long-term residents of member states, European member states or countries associated to Horizon Europe. Long-term residents are people who spent 5 years or more in a EU country, in a EU member state or associated country. Eligible researchers are in possession of a PhD at the call deadline and have a maximum of 8 years of research experience after PhD. This limit was newly introduced for this year's call. And this limit can be also extended for reasons like parental leave or also research in a non-associated third country. Also, a reason to extend this limit is compulsory national service or time spent not working in research or also long-term sick leave. And for eligible researchers, the mobility rule applies. This mobility rule has been unified as there are no longer any different panels. For the global fellowships, it applies for the outgoing phase of the fellowship. So this one and only mobility rule says that an eligible researcher should not have resided or carried out his or her main activity in the country of the future host institution for more than 12 months in the 36 months before call deadline. The MSCA are not only based on the principle of physical mobility, so that researchers who receive funding have to move from one country to another to acquire new knowledge, skills, and competences, and also develop their research careers. Researchers are also strongly encouraged to move between sectors and also between disciplines. And coming with this so-called triple I dimension is a strong collaboration with industry and SMEs. In MSCA postdoctoral fellowships, every researcher needs to have a supervisor appointed by the hosting institution. This person should be chosen wisely with regards to the content of the proposed research and also with regards to the fellows' training needs. This year, the European Commission came up with the new guidelines on supervision to ensure that researchers are adequately supervised in the MSCA postdoctoral fellowships. So you find these guidelines under the link indicated on this slide. And there's an additional document that is good to know if you're interested in the MSCI PF. It's the Green Charter, which is a set of general principles and objectives that promote the sustainable implementation of research activities in line with the European Green Deal and also with the United Nations 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. The MSCA Green Charter constitutes a code of good practice for all recipients of MSCA funding, both also for recipients of such postdoctoral fellowships. And this Green Charter promotes the mainstreaming of environmental considerations in all aspects of the project implementation. With this, the Charter seeks to reduce the environmental footprint of MSCA-funded projects and also to raise awareness of environmental sustainability and to serve as a catalyst in promoting best practice in sustainable research management. The financial management of the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions differs considerably from other research projects in Horizon Europe. In the MSCA, the EU contribution is based on unit costs expressed in person month. It will be automatically calculated from the information provided in the proposal using the rates and coefficients given in the work program. The work program, by the way, is the legally binding document for all MSCA. It has been published a while ago and can be also found under the Funding and Tenders Opportunities portal. Unit costs organized in several cost categories are used instead of funding rates, as I said. The different cost categories cover the salary of the fellows, as well as their research and training costs and costs related to project implementation. And the amounts of the unit costs are subject to annual changes, and these are stated in the work program for the respective year. The EU covers costs related to the recruitment of the researcher, but also research training and networking costs, as well as management and indirect costs. The maximum amount is fixed in the grant agreement. And there are different cost categories. Basically, there are the contributions for recruited researcher per person month and the institutional and unit contributions per person month. Researcher unit costs are divided into living allowance, mobility allowance, and family allowance. The living allowance is the EU contribution to the gross salary costs of the researcher and amounts to €5,080 per month. A country correction coefficient applies to the living allowance in order to ensure equal treatment and also equal purchasing power parity for all researchers. And is defined, this is also defined in the annex to the work program. The living allowance, just let me check. The living allowance is a gross amount. Also, the net salary results, no, wait, I just, yes, just a moment. In addition to the living allowance, that's where I was now. In addition to this living allowance, a mobility allowance is paid to the researcher, and this is amounting to €600 per month. And furthermore, there is a family allowance that is paid only in case the researcher has family obligations. And then you see here on this slide, there's also long-term leave allowance in case of any leave that might come up during the project, and also a special needs allowance. And then there are the research training and networking costs. They amount to €1,000 per month and are managed by the beneficiary, and they are to contribute to expenses related to research training and networking unit costs, the activities. And these activities should be outlined in the proposal. However, unused amounts of the money in this cost category can be used for other action-related purposes, so project-related purposes, like, for example, the increase of the salary of a researcher, or to organize additional training activities. And then, just a moment, then the management and indirect costs, they amount to 650 euro per month. And these costs are to be used for the management and the indirect costs of the project. Yes, just for the management of the action. And also here, unused amounts can be used for other project-related purposes. Oops. I just noted here some additional information about the different cost categories, like living allowance, mobility allowance. Um, the mobility allowance is usually used to pay to cover private mobility-related costs like travel and accommodation costs that emerge from the moving from one country to another. And then the family allowance uh, um, covers mobility-related costs of researchers with family obligations. So, and family obligations is defined by marriage, first of all, then relationship with equivalent status to marriage, or also dependent children who are actually being maintained by the researcher. So, and then here again, um, that research training and networking costs, they are used for training and networking activities that contribute to the project to the research career development. But they can also be used for visa-related travel expenses and from for additional costs arising from optional secondments. Okay. Here is an example of a French researcher without family obligations who applies for a European fellowship jointly with a university in Germany for a 24-month fellowship. You can see here that the living allowance is multiplied with the number of months and the country correction coefficient for Germany. And together with the mobility allowance, the researcher costs will sum up to 134,247 euro, and the institutional costs will be 39,600 euro. So in total, the EU will pay 173,847 euro for this 2-year fellowship. So the above rates, above mentioned rates, they apply to postdoctoral researchers devoting themselves to their projects on a full-time basis. But researchers may also, but only in agreement with the supervisor and the beneficiary and with approval by the granting authority, so in Brussels, researchers may implement their projects on a part-time basis. In addition to the possibility to request part-time work for personal or family reasons, postdoctoral fellows may opt to work part-time in order to, for example, pursue supplementary activities. These might include creating a company or also pursuing other research projects or engaging in advanced studies that are not related to the MSCA grant. Part-time arrangements are not allowed during the outgoing phase of the global postdoctoral fellowships, and any supplementary activities carried out part-time in parallel with the MSCA action must be agreed by the researcher and the beneficiary, and also must be approved by the project officer in Brussels. If the project is implemented on a part-time basis, the researcher must dedicate at least 50% of his or her working time to the action funded by the MSCA. And the beneficiary should report the cost as pro rata of the applicable full-time unit contributions. There are no major changes with regards to the evaluation process. Still, proposals are evaluated by external independent experts via a dedicated platform. Proposals will be evaluated by one of 8 main evaluation panels. These are chemistry, social sciences and humanities, economic sciences, information science and engineering, environment and geosciences, life sciences, mathematics, and physics. Each panel will establish 2 ranked lists, one for European and one for global postdoctoral fellowships. There are no career integration or the specific society and enterprise panel or the reintegration with the career restart panel anymore. These don't exist anymore in Horizon Europe. European and global postdoctoral fellowships will have separate budgets, and the distribution of respective available funds will be proportional to the number of eligible proposals received in each main evaluation panel. Applications will be evaluated by experts, as I mentioned, based on a award criteria on 3 award criteria: excellence, impact, and the quality and efficiency of the implementation. The proposals will be evaluated against the MSCA postdoctoral fellowship award criteria applying weighting factors, and also these are set out in the work program. You see here that excellence is weighted 50%, impact 30%, and implementation 20%. Proposals are evaluated remotely, and evaluation scores will be awarded for each of the 3 criteria. Yes, and all of the separate elements of each criterion will be considered by the expert in their assessment. Evaluation scores will be awarded for each of the 3 criteria, and each criterion will be scored out of 5. So scores will be awarded with a resolution of 1 decimal place and will be subject to this weighting factor. And then a weighted total score will be calculated based on the scores of the 3 individual criteria. An application scoring equal or above 70% will be considered for funding, within the limits, of course, of the available call topic budget. And all applications below 70%, a score of 70% will be rejected. And as I said, for this year, there are not yet any resubmission limitations, but such are expected for the calls from next year onward. Yes, I claim here that every postdoctoral fellowship proposal is composed of part A and part B, but I have to add kind of a disclaimer. We do not have the proposal template for the MSCA postdoctoral fellowships yet, although the call is open. But based on what we know for the other programs, we assume that there will be these 2 parts again for this year's call. But this has to be verified once the template is out. Part A will most likely contain administrative data, so like researcher information, beneficiary information, gender equality plan, information on the budget, ethics, security, and also you can choose keywords in part A. And part B is divided into part B1 and B2. And part B1 is the core part of the proposal. It contains the details of the proposed research and not only of the proposed research, but also of the proposed training activities, as well as practical arrangements planned to implement them. And this part will be used by the experts to undertake their assessment. This part is restricted to 10 pages. And the award criteria you already know, and the structure of the postdoctoral fellowship proposal will be along the content of these criteria. The 3 parts are corresponding to the award criteria, like excellence, impact, and implementation. So in the first part of the proposal, the following information should be provided. So information about the quality and pertinence of the project's research and innovation objectives, and also about the extent to which they are ambitious and they go beyond the state of the art. Then information on the soundness of the proposed methodology. This is including interdisciplinary approaches, consideration of gender dimension and other diversity aspects if they are relevant for the research project, and also the quality and appropriateness of the open science practices. Then this part contains information about the quality of the supervision, of the training, and of the two-way transfer of knowledge between the researcher and the host. And last but not least, information on the quality and appropriateness of the researcher's professional experience, competences, and skills. In the impact part, researchers should describe the suitability and quality of the measures to maximize the expected outcomes and impacts. Yes, this should come in the form of a dissemination and exploitation plan, including also communication activities. And then the credibility of the measures to enhance the career perspectives and employability of the researcher, and the contribution of the fellowship to his or her skills development. And then also information on the magnitude and importance of the project's contribution to the expected scientific, societal, and economic impacts. So this is new this year. The impact should be described also on a societal and economic level. And finally, in the implementation part, this information that should be provided is about the quality and effectiveness of the work plan. There should be an assessment of the risks and the appropriateness of the effort assigned to the work packages. Then information on the quality and capacity of the host institution and participating organizations, including the hosting arrangements. And for part B2, there's no page restriction and it should contain the researcher's CV, for example, also letters of commitment from the host for outgoing phase of global fellowships, for example, or also from the hosts of the additional placement at the end of the fellowship in a non-academic institution. And then also participating organizations should be described in part B2 here. And if there's additional info needed, that can also be provided here about ethics and security. And as I said, there's no page restriction for this part. The 21 postdoctoral fellowship call opened on 22nd of June, or let's say it was supposed to open. Still, we do not have all the documents ready there. Yes, on the call page this morning, it was still indicated that the call is forthcoming and not open yet, but maybe that changed in the meantime. Yes, and soon I think all the documents should be ready. They can be accessed on the call page. And this year's call budget is going to be 242 million euro. This is looking back on the last 7 years. Doing so, we can say that in the different years between, in the last 7 years, between 8,438 and 11,382 proposals were evaluated per call. Overall, the success rate in this funding scheme has been around 14% over the 7 years. So if you have an excellent project idea, you should now start looking for a suitable host institution and supervisor. And you should think about whether including one or several secondments or an additional placement would make sense. Yes, and you should have a close look at your training needs, at where you want to take your career to, and what you will need to get there. The MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowship is one way to advance your career by including appropriate training according to your needs and like this, filling the gaps in your set of skills. Yes, and soon all the necessary documents will be available on the call page. And there's a lot of support you can get. And depending on where you are in the world, you can get the support you would like to from the worldwide net of national contact points for the MSCA. You can either approach the NCP in your country or in the country where you are currently, or the one in the country of your future host institution. You find the contacts of my colleagues worldwide via this link. And as I mentioned, proposal submission will still be done through the funding and tenders portal, where also all the important documents like the work program or the guide for applicants will be published on this respective call page. You should familiarize yourself with the guide for applicants as well as the MSCA part of the work program. This is linked here on this slide. Yes, these are just the documents you should know when you go for an application to this call. And here on this slide, I put some more important links, like the one to the funding and tenders opportunities portal, then to the official Marie Curie Actions website, and also to the EURAccess portal. Yes, exactly. And the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions, they are also active on social media. You can find the contact here. And finally, I'd like to thank you for tuning in and spending this last 40 minutes with us. All the best, and thank you very much for your attention.